Hi everyone, my name is Adri and this is the Lazy Arts channel. In this video I will show you how I made this button-up shirt, which is probably my all-time favorite make, and I literally wear it every week because I love how comfortable and flattering it is. And yeah, I made this shirt only a few months in my sewing journey of sewing not just clothes but anything. So this is a message to anyone that if you want to wear shirts and you want to make them, you can do them. I wouldn't suggest to make it on your first or second project, but as a third, just have a go at it. If you are already a bit familiar with your sewing machine, you just have to move on patiently and carefully. And also, this was the first garment I made from an actual pattern, which was a free pattern from the fabric store, the Noa Shirt, and I will link it in the description if you want to make it as well. They have written instructions and helping photos, and this was the base I made this shirt on, but I think you can benefit from a more visual aid, so that's why I thought I will show you how I made this shirt, because you can use that not only for this pattern but any pattern out there for a button-up shirt, because they are constructed pretty similarly. Also, this video will be a pretty long one because this shirt was the longest and most complicated project I ever did, so yeah, I couldn't really leave out many stuff to make it shorter, but I hope it will be helpful and informative for you guys. So without further ado, let's get into the sewing. I printed and taped the pattern pieces together earlier, so I folded it out and ironed it on a low setting to make it more flat. I grabbed some of my shirts to figure out which size is the best for me, and then started tracing the pattern to paper. I always keep the original pattern intact to use it again in the future. Then I laid out this thrifted cotton bedsheet to cut out all the pieces according to the instructions. This bedsheet is one of my best thrifts to date, and I made 3 pieces from it, including this shirt. By the way, I only cared about pattern matching at the front panels, but if you want to do it in other areas of the shirt too, then pay attention at this step. For example, I should have really paid attention to pattern matching at the buttonhole and button panels as well. I also had to cut out a few pieces from a fusible interfacing, and this was actually the first time I used any kind of interfacing. And these are all the many pieces, which indicates why this video is so long. First, I had to work on the button areas by ironing the interfacing to the wrong side of the separate long piece and the edge of the wider front panel. And as you can see, I tried to fuse the interfacing from the wrong side, ultimately staining my iron with glue forever. By the way, make sure to leave about 1 centimeter on all edges when placing the interfaces on the fabric. The next step is to fold the front panel edge in by 1 centimeter to the wrong side, then fold inside and press the whole section with the interfacing. While folding, I compare the sections to make sure I fold the same amount all the way. Fold in one long edge of the separate strip as well. Then grab the other front panel and place the unfolded edge of the strip to the edge of the shirt panel, making sure that the right side of the strip faces the wrong side of the panel, because ultimately this strip will be visible from the outside. Sew these together 1 cm from the edge with a straight stitch. And then trim the seam allowance to about half. Then sew the other panel fold closed by the inner edge. Now let's return to the iron and give a good press to the finished panel. And then on the other one, press the sew-on strip away from the shirt. By the way, this project involves heaps of ironing, so if that is something you are not willing to do, then maybe try a different, more simple shirt pattern that doesn't require so much ironing. So after pressing the strip away, then turn it around and fold in and press it again to the right side of the shirt, then pin the edge and sew it closed with a normal straight stitch. Also, make a top stitching on the outer edge for a finishing touch. The next step is to hem the bottom edges of the panels. For this step, the back panel finally joins the game. I made the basting stitch first to help with folding the curved edges, and you should make it with the amount you are supposed to fold it twice, so it will be on the edge of the first fold. The basting stitch is a normal straight stitch with the longest stitch length available on your machine, so it is easily removable later. So after basting all 3 pieces, head out to the iron again to fold and press along the line of stitches, and then once more. Before this second fold, I made sure to clip until the basting line on the curved parts to make the folding easier. Pin down the folded edges and then head over to your sewing machine and sew all along the edge of this fold. Then I headed back to my iron and gave the edges a good press. I know this is a lot of pressing and ironing, but I'm happy to say that since I made the shirt, I only had to iron it like once, and I really wear it every week. So I think it's really worth it to put in the ironing during the sewing and then save yourself from further ironing in the future. Now we will work on the back of the shirt, where we have to make the pleats at the top edge. According to the instructions, you have to fold in from both sides, matching up the notches that you transferred from your pattern. I pinned the two folded in sides and then did a quick basting stitch over the top so it wouldn't move when we are attaching the yoke. After basting, I gave this a good press and then it was time to grab the yoke pieces, which is 2 mirror pieces. At this step, we will enclose this upper edge of the shirt piece with the yoke pieces, so sandwich the back panel between the yoke pieces, making sure that the yokes are facing right sides to each other. After pinning, sew along the edge to attach the 3 pieces together. I gave a press to this seam and then it was time to attach the front pieces to this back piece by using the burrito method. Okay, so guys, at this step, really pay attention which side you face to which side, because I did it the wrong way first, which you can see in the video. I didn't film the second after seam ripping, but you really have to make sure that the back piece is laid out wrong side facing you, but you place your front panels right sides facing you, because the part that faces you will be actually on the outside. So pin it right sides facing you to the inner yoke at the shoulder seams. And then comes the burrito part, where you have to roll up the front and back pieces as tightly as possible. And then fold out the other yoke piece from under and connect and pin it from the other side to the shoulder seam, ultimately sandwiching the front panel pieces between the yoke pieces. Now sew everything together with the given seam allowance. Trim the seam about to half before turning everything inside out. And yeah, when turning, that was the point I realized I did this the wrong way around, and it was quite a pain in the ass to unpick and do this again, especially after trimming the seam allowance, but yeah, I managed it and then I moved on to the next step. So really make sure that you put everything together in the right direction. So after redoing this burrito stuff, I had to top stitch around the yoke and around the shoulder seams. This gave the shirt that professional finished look. So next came the color, which is probably the most confusing part, because who is ever paying attention like how their collar is constructed? But the instructions were pretty clear, so it was a satisfying experience. So first I again had to cut some interfacing pieces, one to each pair of the collar pieces. And then I fuse them to their respective pieces, and it really doesn't matter which one you choose for this. Next, I had to sew together the pointy visible collar piece, right sides facing each other, and I had to sew on 3 sides of the collar, leaving out the bottom narrower long edge. Then I came back and trimmed the seam allowance, paying special attention to the corners, so it will be easier to turn everything inside out and have sharp edges. For the corners, it's nice to have some pointy but dull object like a chopstick or a knitting needle to push it out. I think I use my tweezer here, which came with my sewing machine. Then give the whole thing a good press. And head over to your sewing machine to give a stop stitch to these 3 parts you already sewed together. Grab your other collar piece with the interfacing and fold in 1 cm on the bottom edge of this piece, which is the longer one. Next, you have to sandwich this outer collar part between the lower rounded collar part pieces, and make sure that at this step every piece faces right side to the other. Then again, pin and sew on 3 edges, so like the curved corners and the bottom edge where you sandwich the collar piece along the edge, but make sure to leave the upper seam allowance out of this stitching, so the about 1 cm space where you don't have interfacing, don't sew there because you need that later. After sewing, trim the seam allowance again and clip in the curved edges to make the edge smoother. After clipping, turn the whole thing inside out and then head over to your machine to give it a good press. Now it's time to attach the collar to the shirt, so grab the shirt and lay out its neckline. And then right sides facing, match up with the edge and the notches, the part that you didn't fold in on the bottom collar piece. Pin it and sew, making sure that you don't catch the other collar part while sewing, so just fold it out a bit and then go all along the edge. And this is where you need that 1 cm we didn't sew together at the 3 sides. Next, fold the collar so it faces upwards, then fold it over and pin it so it really laps over the stitching and the seam that we did earlier, because we have to make sure that when we top stitch from the other side, we really catch the edge of this collar piece. Then make a top stitching on all the sides of this bottom collar piece to secure the neckline and to give a finishing look to the collar. Then give this whole thing a good press and we can move on to the sleeves. First, we have to make the bias binding to enclose the opening on the sleeve. For this, we have to grab the 2 bias cut pieces and fold and press them in half, and then fold the 2 outer edges to this half crease. Then grab one of the sleeves and cut in diagonally a little bit less than 1 centimeter from the upper point of this cut, and this way you will be able to spread this hole out flat and place one edge of the bias binding right sides facing to this hole edge. Pin it and then sew in the crease of the bias binding. When sewing, make sure that you catch the corner of the snipped fabric and you're not just sewing over the hole. After sewing, trim about half of the seam allowance and then go back to your iron. Press the binding away from the sleeve and then fold it over to the wrong side while keeping the other edge folded in. Make sure to cover the whole seam you made previously with this folded in edge. Then pin the bias binding and top stitch the bias binding from the right side of the fabric. Now fold the hole in half and sew from the wrong side of the fabric a little corner on the top edge of the hole, like this. Make a double knot to make sure that the stitch doesn't come loose. Then make the pleats indicated by the notches and the arrows on your pattern. You have to fold from one notch to the other towards the hole on your sleeve. Press it, pin it, and then sew a basting stitch over the pleats. Now you can use the seam settings to make gathering stitches between the notches on the top of your sleeve. Make sure to leave about half an inch between the ends of the gathering stitches and the end notches. Now it's time to fit the sleeve into the armhole. Start by matching the notches together and pinning everything that is outside the gathering stitches, then pin the center notch to the shoulder seam as well, and then gather up the top of the sleeve until it fits the armhole. You can do this by grabbing the two top threads of the gathering stitches and then pulling on them until the sleeve fits the armhole. Now you can sew them together from one end to the other. Remove the gathering stitches. Then finish the fraying seam with a zigzag stitch or an overlocker. Then go to your iron and give a good press to this seam. The next step is to attach the sides and the underarms all at once. For this, match up the armpit points of the sleeves and then pin the sides and the sleeve together, right sides facing. Then sew with the given seam allowance and then finish the edge with a zigzag stitch or an overlocker. My cat wasn't happy that I was doing this instead of petting her. The next and last constructional part of this project is to make the cuffs of the sleeves, for which you have to grab your cuff pieces and then fold them in half with their wrong sides facing each other, press it and then fold it out and then again fold and press one longer edge of the cuffs towards the wrong side of the cuff, so not like I'm doing in this recording. I did it the wrong way, but I corrected it later. Then I pressed the side seam that I made earlier and moved on to attach the cuffs to the sleeves. So this is the part where I correct my mistake of folding the 1 centimeter to the right side of the fabric. So just to be clear, it has to go toward your interfacing and the wrong side of your fabric. Similarly to the bottom piece of the collar, now you have to fold it in half again with the wrong side facing you and then sew it on 3 sides, leaving out the seam allowance that you didn't fold in. Then place your unfolded edge to the edge of the wrist part of the sleeve with right sides facing each other. Yeah, I made a mistake at this part because I wasn't sewing it to the right side of the fabric, so I just let it go that day and I continued on a few days later. So as I said, you have to sew them together right sides facing. So this is the actual pinning and sewing part. Then tuck in the seam allowance and make sure that the folded in part covers the previous seam. I'm pretty sure I trimmed my seam allowance and the corners before turning the cuff inside out, just like I did with the upper pointy part of the collar. The last step for this part is to give a good press to the cuff and top stitch it on all 4 sides. Now the construction of our shirt is finally complete. The only thing left is to make the buttonholes and the buttons, which sounds simple but is very time consuming. I think I decided on about 8 centimeters from button center to button center. So here is a relaxing 60-second time lapse of me trying to decide the placement of my buttons with my little cat sidekicks. I always make about 1.5 times bigger hole markings than the button itself, and that results in a snug fit. This was the actual first time I ever used my buttonhole sewing foot and the buttonhole sewing program, so I checked everything thoroughly with my machine manual and did everything by the book, and everything turned out pretty good. Also, I have a full video on how to sew buttonholes and buttons with your sewing machine if you want to check that out for detailed instructions. So first I made the buttonholes on the main part of the shirt, and I also had to make one at the bottom part of the collar, which was a horizontal buttonhole. And I also had to make one on each cuff after I decided how tight I want the cuffs to be. Then I fiddle a bit to lay my shirt out right to determine where I have to place my buttons for the finished buttonholes. I made an X marking in the center of the buttonholes, and then I went over to the sewing machine together with some tape. So for the buttons, the method is to tape the button to the shirt on both sides and then use your zigzag stitch to secure it to the shirt by setting the stitch length to 0. So your machine will be sewing in place. Do at least 10 stitches in both pairs and then double knot the end of the threads to prevent them from coming loose. Rip off the tape and then move on to the next button until you're all out of buttons. And when the last button is sewed on, you're finally ready with your shirt. So let's see how it looks. As I said, this is my favorite make to date and I literally really wear it every week. I just love how it feels on me, and yeah, maybe it's not only my favorite because of how much I like it on me, but also because I know how much work and dedication and love went into it. And yeah, I'm just so proud that I made this piece of clothing. I still can't believe sometimes when I look at it. And yeah, these shirts have beautiful details and I think it's just the right amount of oversized. So thank you for watching this video until the very end. I hope I could help or motivate you to start making your own shirt. If you were thinking about it, please give this video a thumbs up if you liked what you saw, and follow for more sewing videos. Thank you for coming with me for this difficult project, and I will see you in my next video. Bye!